Good morning, I'm harleysch from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for December 31st, 2024. Well, as we enter the new year, there are some initiatives that the LaRouche organization is announcing for the beginning of 2025. Most urgent is that we must stop the genocide in the world, especially what's going on in the Middle East. Now, many people are defending Israel's policy by saying that they have a right to self-defense after October 7th and the attack on Israel coming from Hamas. Well, Hamas has been virtually wiped out, and yet the killing is continuing. It's never been the case that mass murder of civilians, especially young people, children, is going to solve the problems that exist in Palestine and Israel. And there's a growing recognition among nations that what Israel is doing is a violation of international law. It's genocide. There's no other word for it. And the U.S. and the United Kingdom are still defending Israel's policies at the United Nations. Now, the latest atrocity was the December 27th attack on the Kamal Adwan Hospital, which is the last hospital functioning in northern Gaza. What does it mean when you destroy the hospitals and the healthcare system at the same point that you're bombing civilian populations and cutting off their food and water supply? Well, that's a policy of genocide. The hospital was set on fire. Some of the staff, including doctors and nurses, were beaten. The hospital director, Dr. Hassam Abu Safiya, was arrested and sent to the prison where many Palestinians are being tortured. Even Haaretz, one of the leading newspapers in Israel, ran an editorial titled, "Leave Gaza's Hospitals Alone." And in the editorial, they described the Israeli policy of attacking the medical system as a violation of the Geneva Convention. And they accused the IDF of carrying out a purpose of ethnic cleansing. So far, more than 1,000 health workers have been killed in the Israeli attacks. So last week, or a couple of days ago rather, on December 29th, a group called Doctors Against Genocide held a webinar. It was an emergency online event which included doctors, human rights activists, politicians, and others. Included especially testimony from American doctors who had been in Gaza. And they reported that there are hospitals with no supplies, including no painkillers, no fresh water, no fuel, making it almost impossible to humanely treat those who are being dug out of the rubble from the constant pounding by the Israel Defense Forces. They called for the release of Dr. Abu Safiya. And probably most importantly, they announced their plans to lobby the U.S. Congress starting on January 8th. And they're calling for a cutoff of military and financial aid to Israel as long as such policies are being carried out. This is U.S. law. The U.S. is not supposed to provide any aid, money, weapons, or otherwise, to countries engaged in violation of international law. So this is one of the three major initiatives that the LaRouche organization will be taking as we go into 2025. First, support the Doctors Against Genocide, and that means mobilize your congressmen to back their demand for an end to funding for Israel, as long as Israel continues these policies. Point number two, back the confirmation of Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence and Kash Patel as Director of the FBI. The last couple of days, I've had reports on the importance of the Gabbard nomination. She's someone who is not part of the Old Boys Network. That's why they're upset about it. That's why the neocons are trying to stop her. They submitted a letter with nearly 100 signatures from the same old, tired national security people that supported the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story. And what's their main argument? Well, they do not want any of their control over U.S. foreign policy and security policy to be interfered with. And since Gabbard is not part of the Old Boys Network, in fact, what they're saying about Gabbard and Kash Patel is that they will jeopardize the continuing good relations of the special relationship in which the U.S. works extremely closely with the Five Eyes intelligence services. Well, these have been disastrous results. We're in war after war. We're supporting coups and color revolutions because of the alliance of the U.S. with the Five Eyes. And that's the main reason why we're sticking to the Ukraine war, why Biden is continuing to pour billions of dollars into a war which can't be won. Their fear is that Gabbard and Patel would be a threat to this intelligence cooperation. Now, that's good. We need to break up that cooperation. There's no reason for the United States to be functioning as a subordinate to the ideology of the British Empire. And that's exactly what's happening. That's why we've gotten into these wars. And that will be the subject of the Manhattan Project on Saturday, where we take up the issue of the role of Zbigniew Brzezinski as the point man in the U.S. for the Anglo-American Empire. Brzezinski's legacy lives on through people like Blinken. So we're going to be covering that. Let me finally say on the second point, the hope would be that Patel and Gabbard would make sure that the intelligence community would stay out of its interference in U.S. politics. And the best way to do that would be the exoneration of Lyndon LaRouche, who is a target of intelligence community illegal activities for almost 50 years. Now, the third initiative is that what we're seeing is that the cartels, including the financial cartels, are increasingly desperate to cover the unsustainable amount of debt that's on the books of banks and corporations. And this requires significant U.S. military involvement to maintain the empire, to loot countries, to steal raw materials, to use cheap labor. And this is why there's a revolt growing in the global south against the financial policies of the north. And so the question then is, can we end the looting of the colonial sector? Well, the Pope just declared 2025 as a Jubilee Year, which means a shift from the collection of debt at gunpoint to a new development architecture. This, of course, has been the main issue that the LaRouche organization has been fighting for, going back to August 15th, 1971, to Lyndon LaRouche's launching in 1975 of the International Development Bank, to our fight against the IMF, against the central banks, the Federal Reserve, and the possibility that now we can use this year as a Jubilee Year to end the unjust looting of the poorest countries of the world. And by the way, keep your eye on this, because those banks and financial institutions are going to move to get the Congress to allow them to loot the populations in the industrial sector. We already see it. The inequality between rich and poor is growing as we're seeing the middle class in the United States and Western Europe disappearing. So this is an important shift to a development architecture. We can use the Jubilee Year precisely for that purpose, to establish the basis of a just economic system which works for the mutual benefit of all. Now, I'll be discussing these three initiatives and more with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. On Wednesday, we have our weekly webcast dialogue. And joining her this week on the German language webcast will be former CIA analyst and peace activist Ray McGovern. And we'll have tomorrow in the description section links to those two events. In the meantime, if you wish to communicate your ideas and questions to Helga Zepp-LaRouche, you can send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. That's also in the description section. So with that, I wish everyone a happy new year, an end to 2024, which has been, for the most part, a terrible year for humanity. But things look brighter for the future, and I urge you to be working with us to make sure that bright future is realized.